Why China, Beijing, thinks it can beat Trump. This may be the shortest lasting revolution in history, just 1 week after US President Donald Trump imposed so-called reciprocal tariffs on the world as part of a plan to replace a global trading system based on most favored nation status and national treatment with individually negotiated bilateral arrangements. He has effectively called off the experiment. Yes, there are still 10% tariffs imposed on most everyone, along with higher tariffs on autos, steel, and aluminum, but these are likely ceilings, and the only direction for these barriers is to move down. The one exception, of course, is China, which we must now always emphasize, as of this writing, faces US tariffs of roughly 150%, if one includes the standard tariffs on trading partners, the penal tariffs imposed on Trump's first term and left in place by President Joe Biden, the 20% on fentanyl-related goods, and the duties announced on April 9th. This may be the shortest lasting revolution in history, just 1 week after the US president imposed the so-called reciprocal tariffs. Trump's fans say that this is a well-concealed plan to focus on Beijing. Others may see the shift as a face-saving way to reframe a retreat after markets crashed and businesses went into shock. Either way, it seemed hard for China to escape unscathed unless Trump makes another sudden U-turn very soon. The United States still can impose a lot more pain, albeit at significant cost to itself, including financial sanctions and banning exchange students or travel altogether, and can offer benefits to other trading partners that join the campaign to isolate China. A China cutoff from the global economy and society would face enormous economic, political, and geostrategic troubles. Despite this danger, my sense, says the writer, is that the Chinese government believes that it has no choice but to stand its ground and that its leaders will not submit to negotiations in which they are the only ones expected to make concessions. Moreover, my recent travels to China and elsewhere reveal a broader, modestly more positive reprisal by Chinese and international audiences about the resilience and strengths of the Chinese system. During trips to China from late 2022 to late 2024, I found a country struggling along almost every continuum. The last few months of COVID-19 pandemic were scary, as residents of many cities faced suffocating lockdowns and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people were severely sickened or perished. The economic rebound that was supposed to occur following the end of the government's zero COVID policy rapidly evaporated. In an effort to jumpstart growth, mountains of capital were poured into new manufacturing facilities for electric vehicles, batteries, medical equipment, robotics, and other sectors. However, domestic consumption did not grow to meet it, leaving a huge gap between supply and demand, and severe deflation at the factory gate. Pandemic insecurity, the collapse of housing market, and a weak social safety net led households to expand their precautionary savings and for young couples to forego having children, worsening the demographic problem. The broader political tightening and emphasis on state security also took its toll on public sentiment. Indicators for consumer confidence dropped like a rock in early 2022 and have barely moved since. As a result, many conversations among Chinese themselves during this period centered on why the Chinese leadership seemed unwilling to admit the extent of the problems and take the steps needed to boost growth. Hypotheses include a lack of accurate information about the country's travails making it to the top, a weak team without a smart governing plan, the prioritization of security over economics, or leadership fervently committed to focusing on advanced technology, what propagandists call the new productive forces, as the country's most important growth driver. These domestic anxieties were mirrored outside China. At a conference for thousands of institutional investors held by JP Morgan in early 2023 in Miami, the central debate was, is China investable? There was no consensus, as some argued that the end of the zero COVID meant new opportunities, while others stressed the supply chain vulnerabilities and the crackdown on private sector as reasons to hold back. A year later, at the same conference, there was a consensus answer: no. International investors offered a litany of worries about China's short-term environment and long-term trajectory. Many said they had sold down their positions and relocated their funds elsewhere, particularly to the United States. Fast forward to 2025, and the mood within China and from many external observers has perceptibly brightened. A part of the explanation lies with recent domestic developments. The first was the leadership's admission last September of the country's severe economic challenges and the subsequent announcement of the major stimulus plan, whose details were revealed this March. The second was the unveiling of DeepSeek's path-breaking large language model, which suggests that Chinese innovators were able to find workaround to US-led technology restrictions. In discussions with business executives in China, March 2025, interlocutors suggest that the worst of the economic downturn was over and that they could see initial shoots of renewed growth. An auto executive said demand for their EV models was growing so fast, far faster than anticipated, and that they would move up plans to open manufacturing facilities abroad. An executive from a semiconductor firm sanctioned by the United States, said that they had improved their production efficiency and quality in the absence of service support from Western equipment suppliers. None said it was time to breathe a sigh of relief, highlighting the difference between announcing policies and having them generate results. One emphasized the continuing higher interest rate that private firms must pay for credit compared with state-owned enterprises. Nevertheless, the dark clouds of previous years had receded. The same shift was visible among the international business community. In the early 2025 version of JP Morgan conference in Miami, investors no longer complained about the Chinese leadership's perceptive missteps. Instead, they repeatedly asked two questions: how big will the stimulus be, and when will the stimulus translate into faster growth? At the China Development Forum conference held every March in Beijing, that brings together leading Western multinationals and Chinese leaders, business executives after business executive highlighted their plan for new investments in China. Although changes in Chinese policies and some technology breakthroughs explain some of the mood swings, the most important source of restored confidence lies 12 time zones away in Washington. Whether in Beijing, Shanghai, New York, Miami, or elsewhere, in meeting after meeting, in the first quarter of 2025, the number one topic was Trump. Almost every one of the conversations revolved around befuddlement at one or more of his policies. Most alarmingly, although the context is so immensely different, many people without prompting compared today's United States with China during the 1966-76 Cultural Revolution, a period of unprecedented turmoil and suffering across the entire country. To be sure, the Cultural Revolution is the Chinese go-to for political analogies in bad times, in the same way that Nazi Germany is for some in the West. Yet the US government's actions have genuinely shocked Chinese observers, some of whom have worked or studied in the United States. Many with whom I spoke in China said they understood the need to cut government waste and reduce corruption, prominent problems in their own country, but time and again observers were puzzled why Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, was leading the charge to haphazardly dismantle agency after agency and fire tens of thousands of civil servants. In a meeting to discuss possible US-China cooperation on science and technology, a Chinese policy expert, after hearing a list of cuts to US government agencies and universities for work on basic science research, climate, medicine, space, and other spheres, asked in amazement, does the US government even believe in science anymore? On numerous occasions, people expressed shock at the attacks on the media, lawyers, and the courts. One interlocutor said he and his friends were among the most pro-American in China, and were proud to have studied there and worked for U.S. companies, but the country they knew seemed to be changing before their eyes, and they could no longer consider sending their children to live or study in the United States. And just as prevalent as the perplexity about U.S. domestic actions was puzzlement about the fundamental changes of U.S. trade and foreign policies, in discussions held less than 2 weeks before Trump's self-declared Liberation Day, but after the fentanyl-related tariffs were imposed, Chinese could not wrap their heads around why the United States would want to dismantle the multilateral trading system that had created so much prosperity in the United States and around the world. The notion that Washington could use tariffs to engineer a radical revival in manufacturing production and employment was seen as an outright fantasy, and some wondered why Washington would abandon its allies in favor of Vladimir Putin's Russia. The significance of these comments has little to do with whether they are correct. Instead, widespread perceptions of what is viewed as governmental ineptitude and societal fragmentation in the United States have become an imperceptible mirror in which Chinese look to reevaluate their own country's present and future. In reality, many of China's leaders are highly ideological. Corruption is widespread, political purges still occur, information is controlled, scientists, both physical and social scientists, face substantial barriers to intellectual freedom, unfair regulatory restrictions on markets abound, and industrial policy puts foreign business at a distinctive disadvantage, all of which threatens China's development prospects and relations with others. But when refracted through the lens of the United States in 2025, China's system is viewed differently. For pro-regime nationalists, Trump is a gift. His illiberal turn means the United States has abandoned his ideological challenge to the Chinese political system. Moreover, his weakening of U.S. government institutions, economy, and alliance relationships translates into making China great again, and his attack on the multilateral trading system makes it far easier for China to be seen as its responsible steward over the United States. For many apolitical Chinese, they are not enthusiastic about today's China and many specific policies, but by comparison, China feels relatively stable and predictable, leaving them minimally satisfied to live in their system and a world that supports it. For liberal Chinese who have long admired the United States, the Trumpian turn in Washington prompts a deep sadness. For them, the United States had been, as they said, a light on a hill and a beacon. In 2008, when the global financial crisis, the United States undermined confidence in China in free markets. In 2025, with its political infighting, the United States is discrediting its political system. The consequence of such melancholy is resignation. To this group of Chinese, Liberation Day must feel like just the opposite. In the coming weeks and months, the contest between Beijing and Washington will continue to evolve in unprecedented, unpredictable ways. Even if Trump backs off his full-scale declaration of trade war, both have economic strengths and weaknesses, and each could aim for the other's weakest points. They will maneuver to outflank and isolate the other by wooing countries in Asia, Europe, Africa, and Latin America. Plenty of drama has yet to unfold. Yet my conversations in China and elsewhere suggest two ironic certainties. First, given the renewed resolve in Beijing, there's almost no chance the Trump administration will be able to wrangle any more concessions for China in the coming months that it could not have obtained on January 20th. The escalation, brinksmanship, and volatility will likely be a monumental waste of time. And second, regardless of who is more effective at weakening the other's economy or outfoxes the other at the negotiating table, the real contest for systemic competition, at least for now, is over. Whether in celebration or mourning, to most Chinese, Trump's red tie is a white flag. This is from Foreign Policy on DNYUZ. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support. and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.